Hey, everybody, Healthy Leader community. We are here and live with Dr. Bhrett McCabe. He has been instrumental in my life in writing the Mindside Manifesto and How to Break Free from Failure. Those two books have been critical, and personally from all the different messages that we've sent to you guys, those daily messages we sent came from Dr. McCabe. So we are thrilled to have you, Doc. Please give us, let's do this elevator speech of, you've got 30 seconds. Who are you? What do you do? Go.
I'm a psychologist who specializes in performance and helping individuals touch base and kind of identify who they are in the competition and who they are from a self-belief model type of thing. So very fortunate to do what I do. It's no more important time in our competitive environment in our lives than right now. So great opportunity for me.
Thank you. Thank you. We've got a couple things that we want to touch on today, and we certainly respect your time. So first things first, failure. Failure happens. How do we address this, whether it's from a leadership standpoint and then from a personal standpoint? How do we address failure and maybe how we can invest in failure?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because, for the last 10 to 15, 20 years, it seems like a lot of leadership books have been talking about how to fail forward and fail better and all the other factors. But what we're getting is we're getting more and more individuals that are moving up through the, performance matrix. Our younger generation, when they experience failure, there's a catastrophic failure in the system that highlights a problem with them. And it's a unfortunate cognitive distortion that's happening, because what's happening is people are seeing failure as a reflection that they're simply not good enough to be at the levels they need to be at. Despite the fact that we know that failure is nothing more than a window into areas of improvement. It's not a predictor. It's a reflection of some areas that either were outside of our control that you don't have influence over, impacting, or there's something that you got to do better. Years ago, we really reinforced the opportunity for individuals to develop and grow and to emerge into what they believe that they could become, right? They could ascend into this person, and we gave them time to do that. And I'm not sure if it's social media, I'm not sure if it's societal demands, I'm not sure if it's context, but there appears to be an absolute urgency for individuals to be at their best immediately. And I think some of it in the youth sport market comes from the need to be recruited, and the pressures that parents feel to get their kids recruited, where players have to be, if they're not being recruited by freshman or sophomore year, they're not any good, which is completely, bogus. And so as a result, people go to college and they think they should play right away. I think if you ask young people who are emerging into the workforce or coaching ranks, you need to be a head coach by the time you're 32 to be. There's a lot of those pressures which are completely artificial. And what it does is it takes the failures that are necessary fertilizer for growth, and it puts them onto people trying to prevent them from happening, afraid that they're going to happen, because I've found that the top insecurity that individuals have in today's world is that they're inherently not good enough for what they're about to embark on. Instead of saying, I'm not good enough right now, and that's fine. Like, I don't do things the way I need to do it. I'm not prepared for this, but I'm going to learn by immersing myself in the drama of competition, in the drama of the workforce, and I'm going to figure out how to make myself better. It's the only way to do it. Nobody could sit back prospectively and think, man, I know exactly every challenge that's coming my way, and I know what to do to prepare for it. So failure is absolutely vital. Mm-hmm. We can't live in a world where failure is not an option. We must have failure as an option every single day. But at the end of the day, we must also understand that it may not go our way, and it's not a reflection of who we are or what we are as a player, person, coach, whatever.
Awesome. Thank you. You hit on something, and I wanted to touch it. How to transition pressure. So what are some things that we might be able to say when we're feeling or thinking that the expectation piece, right? Ben Newman always talks about standards over expectations. So when we have this expectation that we have to be this, and so we're putting this pressure on us, what could we do instead?
Well, you have to understand that you can't replicate the pressure of competition, the pressure of um, importance, right? And so, I think a lot of times what we do is we rely on hype and we rely on vernacular to elevate us to be ready for that. But what we really need to do is to understand how pressure impacts us.
Mm-hmm.
Now, hype will only get you 5% of the game, and
Right.
what the difference is understanding our personal interaction and our personal relationship with pressure. And so, when people go into that pressure environment, they need to know, because you're going to change mentally, you're going to change physically, you're going to change in the ways that you make your decisions and identify opportunities or threats, and you're going to change with your grittiness. Okay. And so what happens is when things happen like that and you get put into that environment, your head starts swimming, you start thinking faster, your fight or flight response elevates, and you have a much harder time finding the pathway through it. Okay. But if you've done it 5 to 10 times, that urgency slows down. Your mind becomes more acclimated to the environment. You habituate to the stressors. And then what happens is then you can see the way through. Well, there are things that you can do. You can work on having an anchor, something that you go back to that is usually something physical that you're like, look, no matter what's happening, anytime, anywhere, I'm right here. So best way to describe it is if you're driving with a group of friends and it's late at night and it's raining and you're kind of lost and your GPS isn't working and the radio is blasting and it's pouring down rain and you got 4 people yelling at you directions, it's overwhelming, right? You don't intensify the moment by hyping up and turning on rock music.
Right.
Okay. And that's the mistake that happens in my field all the time is people are like, oh, we're just going to hype you up. No, prepare them to go out into that environment and then educate themselves so that when they're out there, they understand that personal relationship. Say, wait a minute, when I get amped up and I get excited and I get stressed, the number one mistake I make is that I start trying to resist negative thoughts and fears because I'm afraid of them. Instead, I need to embrace them. I need to understand that they're okay. I had a young kid in an appointment yesterday who had been told forever that he could resist negative thoughts and all this other stuff. So when he had negative thoughts, he thought that was a sign of being weak-minded because he couldn't limit the negative thoughts that were happening because he was told that great athletes love it all the time. Great athletes never struggle. Great athletes are always attacking, right? He didn't understand that the reality of the fact is that they're flooded by negative thoughts and fears and doubts because they're in an uncomfortable environment. Once you reset what he understood based on reality, and not motivation, and all of a sudden flipped it. Then all of a sudden that pressure dynamic flipped. And he's like, wait a minute, I can learn to become better in that environment. And now we flip him into one that's learning and growing and developing to get better in that scenario. Nobody's born with this inherent ability to play under pressure.
Right.
Now, if you look at individuals that move up through, let's say, the sporting ranks, you have individuals who come out and they have a lot more early exposures. They may be more physically gifted because of age or developmental path. And so they get early confidence. But what happens is eventually everybody hits the ceiling. And when they hit that ceiling, how do they adapt to go to the next level, right? You've got to be adaptive in the way that you think. And the only way to do that is to immerse yourself into high pressure environments and learn to grow through them. Mm-hmm. And nobody, if you look at, the best players that play in their sports, people think they're clutch and they were born, they learned how to do that. They learned to put themselves in that situation. And if you look at most of them, they don't hype up in that environment. They lock in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My man Dan Dworkis from Emergency Medical, he talks about just that gradual pressure, applying gradual. And so how do we, one of the things I suggest basketball players and coaches were to do was increase the people that are in your practice. So then fear is the number one thing. Fear of failure in front of my peers is the number one thing for most high school athletes. And I could be wrong. You could.
No. Yep.
So I suggested, how about increasing more people to watch so that becomes something that they become used to. Mm-hmm. So now maybe more parents come in and now I don't have that fear anymore. Same thing with teaching them what they're going to feel when they go to the free throw line when there's 2 seconds left.
Yep.
I know that you do that a ton with your golfers. What am I going to actually feel? Well, my hands are going to get clammy. My heart rate's going to elevate. I might even feel some shaking in my legs. So if I prepare them ahead of time for that feeling, they'll recognize it as this. I knew this was coming.
Mm-hmm.
Is that spot on? Is that
It's exactly. I mean, here's the deal. I can train you to be an astronaut. We can go through all the flight training. I can put you in every simulator in the world, but until your ass is on that rocket going out through the atmosphere, you don't know how it's going to feel.
right?
And so we can prepare you and we can say it's similar, but it's different, right? There's a consequence that's associated with being out on that limb. I tell all my athletes, like, if I put you on a balcony and I want you to look over the balcony, would you do it? And some will say, well, of course, what floor? I'm like, well, why does the floor matter? You haven't forgotten your ability to stand, or you lost that ability based on the floor, have you? And like, well, if I'm on the 100th floor, I'm going to be holding on a little tighter and I'm going to be watching. I'm like, okay, that makes sense, right? Because the consequences are greater.
Right.
You fall over the balcony on the first floor, you'll probably scrape your arm and your knee, but you're not going to splat. You fall off of the 80th floor, you're going to splat. Okay. So what's going to happen is as you get closer to the edge where the consequences are huge, the risk is massive, you're going to try to control more. When the consequences are low, you don't try to control more. You inherently influence more. So you do what you're going to do, but you're more flexible.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as we go up higher and the consequences get greater, we control more and our flexibility goes down. Okay. We become more rigid in the way that we think, more rigid in the way we act, and more rigid in the way that we move. Okay. That's human nature. All right. I don't think anybody, for the most part, minus daredevils, are going to go stand on the edge of a balcony and look over and feel comfortable. There's the what if that happens, and it's a tragic what if.
Mm-hmm.
Well, people go to the free throw line, they sit there and they think, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. All of a sudden, the consequence, something pops in their head that day and goes, don't miss this. It means a lot. Now what happens is it starts cycling into that consequence. We try to control it. Let's get back into our mechanics. Let's try to, whatever, and things like that. And the better thing to turn is like, I hear it, I understand it. Okay, but what's my anchor? My anchor is that when I, tug on my shorts, I remember that I'm always where my feet are.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then what I'm going to do is shoot the best shot I possibly can. I don't need to over control it with my mechanics. Let's knock this down and let's celebrate and let's go for it. And that's the mistake that people make, is that they try to hype themselves up or they try to do stuff like that. And as a result, what they're doing is they're actually masking their pathway. Now, it can help. It can work, right? I mean, we can have people sniff smelling salts and get hype. But the reality is that what we're doing is we're just occluding the mind. I'd rather get somebody to say, look, when you're in that situation, you're prepared, you have a plan because you've done this a lot. Let's rely on those processes that we've got in place, those systems that you've trained. Is this the first time you've been in this situation? Yes, but nothing changes with your anchor. Nothing changes with your process. Is it different? Sure. But let's go ahead and lock in. Let's prepare for that moment.
Awesome. Thank you. Next, let's transition over. So we've got failure done, knocked out.
Mm-hmm.
What about fear? Obviously, what we've discussed already is going to translate over a little bit. Is there a difference in, like we do mountain climbs all the time, and I use your let's focus on the next 2 minutes. Like, what is my focus
Mm-hmm.
on that? And so I'm afraid of heights, and yet I take teams up mountains.
Mm-hmm.
So my goal is always, all right, whose boots are in front of me? How do I maintain my focus on their boots when that fear hits? Are there any key things that we can do to address that anxiety, that fear that comes into play, regardless of the situation or why that fear is happening? I'm fear of doing this in front of somebody, or I fear failing just in general. I know some people who actually, some high level coaches who say their number one fear is losing. That's their number one fear.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we address these types of fear?
Fear is inherent to the human body, and it's necessary. If you didn't have fear, you'd have already made mistakes that would prevent you from doing things, right? However, you have to understand your interaction with fear. So if I said, listen, we're going to go out and play, we're going to train, we're going to climb a mountain, we're going to, if I could wipe away fear for one attempt, what would happen? You'd be like, oh, it'd be easy. You just go. Like, okay, so what is the level of fear that's there? Natural fear of don't get hurt and fall and die off a mountain. Okay, that's an adaptive fear, right? That's smart, that's effective, and that's I would say that's very good for you, right? Because what's it going to do? But the difference is that you can try to prevent it, or you can try to realize, okay, what is the best way that I can execute within that realm of fear based on the skill sets I have. Fear is not a predictor. Okay. Fear is an identifier. It identifies the potential. It doesn't predict the potential. That's the difference. It's kind of like saying, the weatherman or the weather, woman can predict the weather. No, they can identify when there's going to be threat. The models are getting better and better to identify, but they can't necessarily say a tornado will hit your house. There's going to say there's high risk in your area. So what do you have to do? You take safeguards, right? You prepare for it. Okay. But there's certain things that are out of your control. Anytime we go into uncertainty, fear is our companion. But uncertainty is a standard. It's not the abnormal. Uncertainty is something that happens anytime we don't know how an outcome is going to go. And what happens is if we have our emotional tag to it, or there's a physical threat to it, like climbing a mountain or something like that. Okay. But if I'm going into a baseball game, there's not really a physical threat to my life there, but there's an emotional uncertainty that's related to my ego. I want to win, and it requires a lot of vulnerability to be great. Okay. So fear is going to come with it because it's going to tell me all the things that could happen and go wrong. That is an adaptive and effective mechanism in our brain. It's doing its job. But that doesn't mean we have to listen to it. And it doesn't mean we have to believe it. All right. Fear is nothing more than identifying potential. But one of the things that we never do is we never evaluate the true percentages of accuracy. We assume that because somebody may think I'm bad and laugh at me if I fail, we assume that it's 100% certainty. It's not. Fear does not work on a 0% or 100%. It works in the levels in between. If it was 100% certainty, that would be a real threat. That's not fear. That's a real threat of a mountain lion standing in front of you. That's not fear. That's reality. Fear is there may be one I'm hearing somewhere out there. Right. All right. So if you watch horror movies, directors and producers use soundtracks to amplify the fear to ready you for the shakes and the jump outs and the scares, right? If you watch a horror film without the music, it's really not scary at all. Okay. The amplification of the sound provides the environment where fear has the opportunity to thrive. That's what happens in our brain. We start connecting dots of fear. We start seeing all the levels of it, and we assume that it's 100% going to happen. But every time the big music comes on in a horror movie and the villain jumps out, then you would become accustomed to it. So there's a randomness to it that sometimes the music amplifies, nothing happens. Sometimes the music amplifies, the villain jumps out. Sometimes the music just starts, the villain jumps out. Sometimes the music is just playing in the background. Okay. And so the uncertainty and the unpredictability of it heightens the mind to be aware that all fear is bad, despite the various levels of depth of that fear and that prediction. So fear doesn't predict, it identifies. And once you understand that, then you have to say, okay, how do I face this? How do I put myself out into it? Is it the route that I want to go? Or is there a better way to do it? Okay. Whatever it is, get to clear intention and abandon the prevention mindset that comes with fear.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let's go. Last thing. What are some habits? Our goal as 2023 comes in and everybody wants to make their goals. I want to hold people not just accountable, but responsible for the things that they're doing. How do we build these habits? What can we do to start building the habits that we want to that are actually going to last a little bit longer? So we truly believe on four blocks, 7 minutes each. Breath work, fitness, reading, reflection. Those are our cores that we do every single day. So what might be some things that we could do every day that can help build us the habits that we need to?
Well, I think you have to understand, first of all, like goals are great. Okay. They're more aspirational and ideal than the actual execution. Okay. Follow through is the hardest part, not the identification of goals. Okay. So don't create things that create natural failure, because we live in a world of negative mood states. We feel angry, we feel guilty, we feel frustrated that we didn't execute, and then that cycles into more relapses and problems and stuff like that. So I'd rather have intentions. Okay. I intend to do these. I intend to eat, a turkey sandwich every day for lunch, but somebody calls and says, "Hey, let's go to the Thai place." Well, there's not a turkey sandwich there. Okay. So you're going to have to be flexible to that, but understand that we're going to try to win the majority of time. Um, Adherence is not 100%, or it's not all or nothing. Once again, it's a continuum. I think what we have to do is understand is that when we identify what we want to try to accomplish, it's great to put it in those boxes of like, look, let me just try to do 1 or 2 things a day that help me in positive. I think that we should have a couple developmental tasks, foundational tasks that we should focus on. It's like, if you want to be a good father and a good husband, and that's one of your goals every day, then let's make it simple. Like, when you come home from work, let's put our phone on the kitchen counter and let's be present. Like, that would be a great goal for, a lot of people in our field. If you want to improve sales on your team, let's increase the number of contacts you make. Okay. I believe that all the other factors will fall out of it. You don't need to set up, gonna send an email to everybody, blah, 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 blah. Like, that should happen as a natural behavior and a habit that follows. Okay. Because, it's kind of like if I'm teaching you how to ride your bike and I push and you start riding your bike, eventually you're going to learn that pedaling keeps you upright. I don't need to teach you, I don't need to tell you to pedal. You're going to figure that out naturally. Okay. If you don't know how to snow ski and you go to ski school, the only way to get good at it is get on the mountain and fall a lot and ski, and you'll realize how to maneuver on your feet. Right. So I don't need to break it down into so many levels, but let's get the primary drivers in place of different factors in our life and just make them aspirational intentions. Like, this is what I intend to do. Anything over that, I'm okay. But this is what I plan on doing. And I think that's where people need help, is that people need help to understand, like, you don't need to go from not doing much December 31st and on January 2nd, you're all in on this new way of thinking. It's impossible to do, right? We do function on shifts and nudges and gradual changes. If you can kind of change your environment a little bit, like, I'm a big fan of James Clear book, Atomic Habits. The brilliance of it is it's a lot of information that people have like, oh yeah, that's like, yeah. Okay, that's the genius of James Clear, is that he took what everyone else already said they knew and made it a bestseller. Okay, that's brilliance. Okay, he didn't reinvent the wheel. What he did is he gave people a consistency and a theory of understanding that made it, communicate. It's like putting together a brilliant masterpiece of music. Okay. All the individual notes have been played in life at some other time, but he made them all work together. That's why I'm a big fan of Atomic Habits. But one of the things that always hit me was, if you want to work out in the morning, like, I don't like to exercise first thing in the morning. I don't enjoy it. My body needs time to wake up. I need energy to get going. And so, but if I get up and take a shower and put on work clothes, the likelihood of me going back to exercise is pretty low, because what will happen is I'll be like, well, whatever. So what I do now is I wake up in the morning and I just put my workout clothes on, and, and I wear them all day, because at the end of the day, I'm like, hey, I've had them on all day, use them. Okay. And that small intention changes me, and the direction is, hey, move more. Okay. Do more movement in what you're doing. Okay. If you want to, if you want to eat healthier, it's not necessarily the fact that you have to meal prep 7 meals a week and have them sitting in your refrigerator, because if you're like me, I'm going to throw them away at some point, because I just don't like to eat the same thing over and over again. But if you journal what you eat, you'll eat healthy. Okay. If you actually write it down, you will eat healthier, because you will have to take that ownership and do that. Okay. It's a small behavior change that has a big implication. And that's the facet that we have to do better.
Awesome. Thank you. Last thing, we've got a lot of people recently that have had a couple children, and even people within their lives that have really struggled with depression. When I hear that, the first thing that for me, that A, I want to kind of understand some past things, but then B, I want to get them moving. Like you said, the prescription drug for exercise is just as high, if not higher, than any of the other prescriptions. So how off am I, number one, and number two, what could they do when dealing with this issue? Whether it's from a leadership standpoint, maybe you recognize in a coworker, maybe you recognize in your kid, or from you recognizing it inside of you that I might be having some of this?
Well, there's no doubt that we are in the midst of a mental health pandemic in the United States, right? Rates of anxiety I've never seen at the rates we're seeing. I would say rates above 40 to 50% of people are suffering from an anxiety disorder that can be diagnosed that's causing impairment in their life. Depression is obviously rising. We're seeing rates of suicide and self-harm increasing. Um, the pressures in life, it's a very tragic outcome to a longstanding illness. Okay. It's an unfortunate in-cause mortality of that illness. Okay. Depression is the number, I think it's number 2 cause of disability in the world. So we're talking massive impacts, right? It's not a failure of who you are if you feel depressed. It's not a failure of your system. It's not you're not weak-minded. It's not God hates you. Okay. It's not the fact that you're thinking wrong. All right. There's a lot more to it than that. And the things that we have to understand that in depression, depression gets a lot of attention, but anxiety is driving behind the scenes. Okay. It's the eroding underneath that's causing the problems, because the anxiety is the fear of what if and the increased of anticipation. So if you know somebody in your life is suffering, okay, the thing about it is that we can try to motivate them out of it. It's impossible to motivate somebody out of it with a depression. It'd be like telling somebody with strep throat, just keep swallowing and the pain will go away. Okay.
Right.
It doesn't work. Okay. And that's why I'm I'm very big on the fact that you need, when you're depressed, you need to get your information from individuals that are, you know, qualified. And what I mean by that is, if you have diabetes and somebody's like, go drink this sludge, that's not the right answer. Okay. I know it may have helped one person out there. You're absolutely correct that you're absolutely correct that exercise is a very effective mechanism for treating depression. The problem is one of the core components is a concept called anhedonia, which is the lack of interest or motivation to do things that normally were pleasurable. So what happens is, while I know that exercise helps, the amount of energy it takes for me to go do it is very low. Okay. So sometimes you have to jumpstart it with either psychotherapeutic medication, which is effective. There was a meta-analysis that was done about 6 months ago to a year ago that made the claim that antidepressant medication doesn't work. Okay. Horrendous study, horrendous. And they're saying, well, it's not the serotonin system. Okay. No, any scientist that's ever worked in the pharmaceutical industry or treatment industry or whatever, right, would tell you that we don't know how antidepressants work. I worked in pharma for 8 years. Okay. I did clinical trial research. We don't know how they work, but we do know that when we're studying them, there's very fine margins between people who respond and people who don't, because depression is a very, very heterogeneous illness to study. We can put 10 people in the same room and we're going to have 10 different exposures. It's not like measuring somebody who has strep throat. We can culture the throat, give them an antibiotic, and boom, it's gone, right? Okay, there's a lot to it. There's a lot of layers. And there's a lot of influence between people's history, their learning history, their experiences, their past, the way that they view the world, and the support they have around them. So my point to that is, it's not just pull yourselves up by the bootstraps. You're exactly right. You need to get out and get moving. You need to get sun. Vitamin D is very effective. It's not going to treat it, okay, but it can help it. It can amplify the help side of it. So we need to get out and get moving. We got to get some small goal-directed activities. Obviously, reach for somebody, and for kids, reach out for help. Okay. And let them evaluate whether or not medication is the answer. If it's a longer standing thing, it may help remove the clouds a little bit so that you can get the right behaviors in place and the right thought processes in place. And psychotherapeutic interventions of going in for therapy and learning ways to realize. And one of the things I've found over time is that a lot of times people who are feeling depressed or experiencing depression come in with a lot of very strongly held beliefs that are erroneous. Okay. They think that they shouldn't be feeling a certain way, but they are. And so they become highly judgmental of themselves. For me in my life and dealing with anxiety my entire life, and periods of times where I get down and exhausted and worn out mentally, and you can call it depression or whatever, is that I've learned to accept what I am as who I am, and I've learned to find pathways through it better. So I know that if I'm in a low spot, I have to eliminate things that are causing me more stress. And I need to find things that it's not that bring joy, because joy is hard there, but I got to know that I'm built to manage that storm. And I think a lot of times what happens is we have young kids, we have family members who are going through significant stressors in their life, and they don't see any options. They don't see any relentment. They don't see any relenting of the pain and the suffering. And so the first thing to do is say, I'm sorry you're going through this, like non-judgmentally. It's not, oh my God, like this is going to predict the worst time in a long let's just be present with individuals who are suffering right now, and let's not judge them. One thing about pain, whether it's physical pain or emotional pain is purely subjective, and it's an individual experience. And so, you can say, well, I lost somebody close to me in my life and I went right back to work and I was fine. Okay, great. That's wonderful. Somebody, doesn't feel valued at work, has lost the emotional connection to their craft, and they're in a tough relationship. Okay. That may not be like the death of a loved one, but how did you handle it? And what could you do to support somebody who's going through confusion? Those are the things that we want them to understand. So yes, I want them to move. I want them to exercise. I want them to have goal-directed activities. I want them to also be in relationships where they're not wearing their friends out with all their problems, learning boundaries of sharing emotions, that it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to have doubts and fears. And sometimes people have thoughts of, I'd be better off dead. That doesn't mean that they're actively suicidal or have an intention. It's just, man, I'm tired and worn out. And sometimes that scares people to have that thought.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to get and say, okay, what is it that in your life can you do that you find joy in? Well, there ain't nothing I find joy in. Okay, you're probably right. Not right now. Okay. But what can we do? And so you have to work with them to understand, like, what is it that they can find joy in their life? What is it that they can experience, and start building from there?
Thank you. All right. All right. Last thing I think is really important as we move on is what is one thing that you wish more people would ask you, or just that you could relay more often?
I wish people would realize that, the uncertainty of life is the standard, right? Like people who have sold this, that you're going to be on top of the world all the time and always dominating, sells a lot of books. It's not accurate. Okay. This stuff is hard because the learning that you're going through as a human is learning how to optimize and find mastery in different levels of your life. And every day you move up into new challenges. So, that's why, when I see things, I just cringe sometimes, because I'm like, man, we're selling a panacea that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Okay. We're selling hope that doesn't really deliver. And we have to realize and prepare ourselves that we are, as humans, are built like work trucks. We get out in the mud, we go do our work, we have dents, we have, scrapes, but we deliver. Okay. We're not this whole world of building ourselves up on Lamborghinis and fast moving cars and private jets and all the other stuff like that. Like, we need to be like, let's be authentic. There's a lot of fake being sold in this world. There's a lot of, get this purse and you'll be happy and all this, but yet our rates of depression and anxiety are increasing, despite the fact that our social media connection is rising faster than ever.
Yes.
We need to go back to authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We need to go back to some of the best teachers in your life, maybe the people right in your life. It may be the janitor at your school. It may be the assistant principal who has experience. It may be a teammate. It may be a coach. It may be a parent. Like, let's look to those individuals to help understand how we get better and we'll be more successful. It's not selling hope and private jets and big condos and $1 million bankrolls, because I will tell you, working in that industry, I'll tell you a lot of what is sold is fake. A lot of it. People who claim to have clients, or they work like, I went and listened to a guy come and talk one time, and very high name, and his first 5 to 10 minutes of his talk was every client he'd ever worked with. I don't know who if those clients really worked with him or not. I don't know the depth of that work. They may have come to a workshop and they stood there and they had their picture taken.
Yeah.
Like, just because they were there, maybe they did have a couple, but to me, the greatness stands in the shadows and highlights and amplifies the other person. And that's what I want to look for. There's some great content out there. And I know I sound jaded when I say that, but I just think we're in a world right now where authenticity has to be the most important thing, not hope.
Yes. Amen. Thank you. And perfect way to end it. Thank you so much. You are going to help this community out. And we are thrilled and blessed and thankful and grateful to be able to have you and learn from you. So as long as you continue to put out stuff, I will continue to give it to the world and share it.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for your support. I appreciate it. And here's to a great 2023.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Blessings.
You got it.